hard as she could, the truck's wheels squealing loudly as it tried to stop in front of a woman who suddenly appeared on the road. However, the tanker truck was too heavy and too fast. Even though she had pulled the steering wheel to the left, the woman's body still seemed to get closer. Jani closed her eyes, preparing for the inevitable collision. But there was no collision. When Jani opened her eyes, the woman had disappeared. The truck shook violently, skidding to the side of the road, almost falling into the ravine on the right side. Reflexively, Jani swerved the steering wheel to the left, trying to control the truck, which was now tilted. The truck finally stopped, stuck on the side of the road, just inches from the edge of the steep ravine. Jani was panting, her heart still beating fast. She stared straight ahead, the dark road and thick fog still surrounding her. "What the hell is this?" she muttered. She tried to gather her wits. There was no woman, no shadows, only a gripping silence. She reached for the water bottle on the dashboard, her hands shaking as she tried to drink. But before the water could touch her lips, something sounded from behind the truck. It wasn't just any sound. It sounded like something crawling on the tank. The sound of metal scraping and a soft, steady tapping. Jani put the bottle down, her body tensing again. She glanced in the rearview mirror, but there was nothing. Nothing to see, just a thick fog moving slowly around the truck. But the sound was still there. This time it was clearer, like something or someone was walking on the tank of her truck. Jani's heart raced, while her logical mind tried to find an explanation. Animals, maybe, she whispered to herself, though her heart knew this was no ordinary animal sound. Taking careful steps, Jani reached for the flashlight she always kept under her seat. With a heavy breath, she decided to get out and investigate. The truck door swung open slowly, the creaking of the hinges eerie in the stillness of the night. As soon as her feet touched the ground, the air outside felt much colder than she had imagined. Jani shone the flashlight up to the top of the truck, trying to find the source of the sound. But there was nothing there, just the big tanker she usually drove. But when she turned to examine it more closely, she saw something that made her blood run cold. On the side of the truck, just above the tanker, was a very clear handprint, wet and smeared with something dark, probably blood. Jani took a step back, shocked. No one should have been here. The truck had just been cleaned before it left, and the handprint couldn't have been there before. Suddenly, from within the fog, a soft voice was heard, like a child crying. The voice sounded very close, but there was no one around. Jani turned her head, looking for the source of the voice, but only the fog covered her vision. "Who's there?" Jani shouted, her voice cracking with the fear she was trying to hide. There was no answer, only the sound of crying that grew clearer and clearer, as if the owner of the voice was approaching, but not visible. As Jani began to feel the fear pressing in more strongly, a shadow emerged from the fog behind the truck. A small, petite figure stood with its back to Jani. The shadow looked like a child, its hair long and wet, its clothes torn and shabby. The child stood still, not moving, just looking down, as if unaware of Jani's presence. Jani swallowed, a chill starting to creep up the back of her neck. "Hey, do you need help?" Her voice trembled. even though her instincts told her not to approach the figure. However, curiosity and the strange feeling that something was very wrong drove her to walk closer. As she started to walk, the little boy suddenly made a sound she never expected. His cries stopped, turning into a horrifying giggle. The sound seemed to echo throughout the forest, making the hairs on Jani's neck stand on end. And without warning, the little boy turned. His face, a pale face with empty black eyes and a wide, gaping mouth, too wide for a human, stared straight at Jani. The laughter that had echoed earlier turned into a horrifying scream that made Jani's knees weak. He stepped back, falling to the ground, the flashlight slipping from his hand and rolling to the side. The figure of the child was now moving quickly toward him, his small hands outstretched with long black nails, as if to grab Jani. Jani screamed, but her voice was drowned out by the chaos inside her head. Frantically, she got up and ran back to the truck, slammed the door, and immediately started the engine. The truck roared to life, and without waiting any longer, Jani pressed the gas pedal as hard as she could. The truck sped off, leaving the little boy's figure behind in the fog. But in the rear-view mirror, Jani saw another shadow. The red-eyed woman from earlier was now floating behind the truck, chasing her, along with the increasingly dense fog. Jani knew this was not over. This terror was far from over, and no matter what awaited her at the end of the road, she could only pray that she would make it out of the darkness of Al-Ashm alive. Jani's truck sped along the narrow road of Roban, the big wheels spinning wildly on the asphalt that was slippery from the fog and light rain. Jani's heart was still beating fast. Her breath was ragged, while the image of a small child and a woman with red eyes continued to haunt her mind. In the rearview mirror, thick gray fog continued to surround her, and in that fog, Jani was sure that something or someone was following her. The truck continued to drive, passing sharp turns and rocky roads, while Jani struggled to control the steering wheel. She hoped to get out of this forest as soon as possible, but the road seemed endless. Every tree she passed looked the same. Every turn felt like it was taking her back to the same place. Just as Jani was starting to feel tired, a familiar voice came back from the radio. An annoying crackling sound between static frequencies, then followed by a soft whisper. "Jani, you can't run." Jani turned to the radio with wide eyes. That voice. It was the same woman's voice, the voice that had been following her from the beginning. Damn. Jani turned off the radio roughly, but the voice was still there. Clearer, closer. It was as if the woman was sitting beside her, whispering directly into her ear. "Jani, you've gone too far. Come back." The words echoed in her head, pressing even harder on her already fearful heart. She knew something was wrong. Something was holding her back in this darkness, but she had no choice but to keep going. "I have to get out of here," she muttered softly, even though her heart knew that the path was no longer predictable. Then up ahead, something appeared, a small light, flickering through the towering trees. It was like a lamp, as if there was another vehicle in the distance. A small hope rose in Jani's mind. Maybe this was a sign that she was approaching a settlement. Maybe there was someone who could help her out of this nightmare. She accelerated her truck, focusing on the light. But the closer she got, the stranger the light seemed. It was moving, but not like a vehicle's headlights. Its movement was slow and floating, as if it didn't belong in the real world. The truck drove toward the light, and Jani suddenly realized what he was seeing. It wasn't a streetlight. It wasn't a vehicle. It was a row of torches, dimly burning torches, held by figures standing still at the edge of the road. The figures were dressed all in white, their bodies stiff as statues and their faces covered with cloth. They stood still, just staring straight ahead with the torches flickering in the darkness. Jani instinctively slammed on the brakes. The truck came to a screeching halt right in front of the figures. Jani's eyes widened, his mouth hanging open without words. What he saw before him was like a silent funeral service, as if the figures were spirits guarding the road. A figure moved. Slowly it raised its torch higher, then pointed towards the darker path ahead. Without a word, without a sound, but the signal was very clear. Don't continue. Jani muttered, realizing that the figure was giving her a warning, but she had no choice. She had to get out of this forest. With a heavy feeling, Jani decided to ignore the signal and started the truck's engine again. As the truck started to move, the figures remained still, staring blankly at her. But as Jani passed them, the air around her felt heavier, and a bone-chilling chill began to spread throughout her body. The truck continued to move, and suddenly a loud sound was heard above Jani's head, like something had hit the roof of the truck, then a scraping sound that extended along the side of the tank. Jani gasped, looked in the rearview mirror, and was immediately stunned to see the shadow of the red-eyed woman floating above the truck's tank. Her body folded forward, staring at Jani with a look full of hatred. "Jani?" The voice in her head whispered again. The woman was closer now, her eyes glowing even more blood red. Desperately, Jani screamed and stepped on the gas harder, hoping to escape from this nightmare. But the woman didn't leave. She clung to the truck like a dark shadow that continued to haunt her. Suddenly, the woman's thin hand reached out, grabbed the truck's window, and knocked on it with her long, sharp nails. "Open!" The voice echoed with a commanding tone, much louder and more terrifying than before. Jani refused. She gripped the steering wheel tightly, hoping to keep driving regardless. But the woman was getting wilder, stronger. Her sharp nails clawed at the window glass, making long, scary scratches. With a sense of despair, Jani looked ahead. Her eyes widened when she realized what was in front of her. The road was cut off. A deep chasm gaped ahead. No bridge, no way out. Only darkness awaited down there. She tried to swerve the other way, but it was too late. The truck was going too fast. Instantly, everything seemed to slow down. Jani could only see the woman smiling cruelly, as if she already knew the end of this journey. The truck plunged into the ravine, the sound echoing throughout the forest. Jani closed her eyes, feeling the truck fall and her body slamming into the steering wheel. As everything went black, the last sound Jani heard was a soft whisper in her ear. "You're mine now.